Hi, I'm Lauri Apple. I'm from Zalando in Berlin. We're based in Berlin, and I'm here to tell you about how you can avoid creating a GitHub junkyard. So what's on the menu? We'll just do a few abouts, about me, about you. Then we'll go through a section about asking why, and why it's important to ask why. And we'll have a bonus hamster picture to add cuteness. Then we'll talk about building junkyards, and I'll give you a case study from my own experience with going through Zalando's GitHub junkyard, and how we cleaned up, which was somewhat of a big dig. In closing, we'll go through a little bit of learnings from our experience that hopefully you can apply for your own organizations or yourselves as individual contributors to the GitHub universe, and give you a little status report about where we are now and where we're going. So about you, really quickly, who here manages the GitHub organization for your company? All right. Who has no GitHub manager at your company? Yeah. Who does open source because it's really fun? Yeah. And who likes to talk about how they're a workaholic and is really proud of it and being busy all the time? I should have raised my hand for the third question too, but... So about me, I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I have blinking. I have two jobs at Zalando. My primary job is working with the software development team that builds our core search architecture. And then, And then also, I am the open source evangelist for the team of 1,700 technologists that we have. Is it okay? Yeah. All right, she's going to check the connection. We're back. Okay, thanks. I'm also one of the open organization ambassadors. Red Hat has a program to promote open organizations with collaboration and transparency. So I write blog posts for them and help build their maturity model for open organizations with a bunch of others around the world. And I have my own little project, Feed Me READMEs, which will give you README editing and project analysis for free. It's not there anymore. So, ooh. That's all right. As long as you don't mind, I don't mind. So, about Zalando, here's a lot of facts. It's a really big company. Like I said, we're based in Berlin, but we do business all across Europe in 15 European countries, and our tech team is about 1,600 or 1,700. When it comes to open source, we have quite a lot of it. This is the front page of the dashboard we created ourselves. It's like our storefront, where you'd find everything at our main GitHub repository, which is /Zalando. And you can find that dashboard at this URL. Some quick things about our open source culture is that we are polyglot, so we have a search engine on our dashboard so you can find the different projects we make in different languages. We actually have several GitHub organizations, and I'll get to the reasons why as I go through my talk. A lot of the tools, if you were to generalize, are infrastructure related, or we have a lot of stuff for working with APIs because we have a microservices architecture and have found this to be necessary. And the TLDR tagline of where we are as a culture is we're maturing. So we're focusing more on quality and less on quantity as we go. Why do we open source? All the usual reasons that are typical of big organizations: development of our people, giving back to the community, improving the quality. We see that developing in the open improves our security, our code, our coverage of tests, things like this. Also for reputation, we're a big company, we want to be out there in the open source world as a presence. And it does help with recruitment too. What do I bring to all of this? So those questions are rather generic. What I like to do is ask why, dig deeper. Why are we doing things like this? What are our motivations for participating in open source beyond those general reasons? Why do we put things on the internet? Is it to solve a problem? Like if we didn't find anything that solved our problem ourselves, so we went, built it, and now we're sharing it with others? Is it to start a dialogue with the community? Is it for our egos? We just want to put stuff on the internet and have our name out there. Why do we build these things in the ways that we build them? I work with all of the folks on our team, and when I do that, I do one by one. You know, what is your motivation? What is your goal? What is your plan? We build a lot of stuff ourselves, so I ask this question a lot. Why are we building this ourselves? Is there something else out there that could do the job that we could contribute to? And are our building methods sustainable? If we're building a lot of stuff, you know, is it kind? Are we being kind to ourselves by creating all of this work and this code? Or are we building a big burden for ourselves that we have to maintain? Why do I ask these questions? Well, part of it is from life experience. So before getting into technology, I was a print journalist, and I also was an online writer and blogger. So behind me are some of the logos for the companies that I worked for, but on this side are the print, and the other side is the biggest online website I worked with, Gawker, which was taken down by Hulk Hogan. So we have two professional wrestlers that will come up in this presentation, and Hulk is one of them. He basically sued Gawker out of existence last year. But when it was running, Gawker was a huge website, a conglomerate of companies. And my experience working for them was quite different from when I was a print journalist. In print journalism, you call people on the phone, you talk to them, you build relationships. It's actually the standard practice. You also have limited space through which you would publish your work because you have like a weekly edition or a daily edition. So to make sure that you actually can economize on what you put out there in the world, you have an editor. And in my experience, the best editors were the hardest, that made me really be precise, answer questions with detail, and drove me to do my best work. In the online scene, you can have all of these things. There are great investigations that are run on websites today. But what I was doing was mostly for speed and generating traffic. I was often working at night, so my editor was in bed, and I had to just kind of put stuff on the internet kind of solo. And when I look back at these two different experiences, definitely the craftsmanship and the quality was more in the print journalism part of what I did. It was a team effort with an editor, and making sure that what I put out there was really going to have an impact instead of just generating a lot of traffic and page views. So I felt a lot of times when I was working like a hamster, like I was just putting 6 to 8 posts per day on the internet. You couldn't do that with investigations. If you're doing a really researched article, you just wouldn't be able to sustain that kind of workflow. It would be impossible. And in online blogging, you can. So this emphasis on speed can really start taking a toll. And I see this happening in software development. We have time pressures, delivery pressures, personal pressures. We want to put out a lot of work, a lot of us ourselves. And it's kind of become a status symbol to be busy. So there are some reasons for why we do this to ourselves. It can be fun. We also can save the day. We're building stuff and making things run, and there's adrenaline rush, and we're getting it out there just in time. But the consequences of this are pretty severe. We're not as smart as we are when we're multitasking. We burn out, and we also don't have the time to ask ourselves, what are we doing? Because we're so busy doing. There seems to be a growing awareness of this issue in the industry. I'm just going to swap out the connector. Okay, she's swapping out the connector. Okay. Because we have CEOs that brag about sleeping in the office and working all the time. And, what is the cost of that? Is that really how we want to live? And there seems to be a growing awareness in the industry of questioning, what are we doing? Jeff Gotthelf, who's one of my favorite thinkers, he just wrote the book Sense and Respond, who's written other books and is a lean UX advocate. He recently tweeted this: we're so busy that we don't actually have a strategy. That can't be the strategy on its own, to be busy. Our prioritization suffers. And we say yes to a lot of things that we might not be able to do or want to do. And one of the ways that we can establish a boundary is by saying no, hitting that pause button and giving ourselves a chance to think. Are we actually being productive? I see this happening in our organization as we open source. So one of my colleagues who has put out a lot of work on GitHub, who is responsible for a lot of systems running, he knows a lot of stuff. I asked him in preparation for this talk, do you actually enjoy maintaining all the stuff that you're putting on GitHub? Do you enjoy this role of knowing all these things and being responsible for them? And he sent me back the Futurama guy. He's like, that's a really hard question. Let's talk about that in person over, coffee later. And I thought to myself, should this question be that hard? Like, what if the answer was simply, yes, I enjoy what I'm doing because it's sustainable? Like, has he even had a chance to think if he's enjoying himself? Or is the pressure to release and make so severe for him that he doesn't have that chance to stop? I asked another colleague, what would we do would we be able to maybe have more time to think if we were given like a boundary or requirement? My suggestion was, if GitHub charged us per repo, what would we do? Would we put out the amount of work? And his response was this: we would change a lot of things. Why aren't we doing that now, is my question. Why aren't we voluntarily saying, wait a minute, do we really need to build all of this stuff and put it on the internet knowing that we would have to take care of it? Now the clickers. This gets into the question about whether GitHub is actually free, which is a conversation I had with Kelsey Hightower last week. We were talking about this concept of free and open source. And I reached out to him because he's talked about minimalism and how he reduces the amount of work, the amount of stuff that he has. So he's got an attitude where less is more. That he's talks about and is allowed to influence his work. And we talked about this idea of free, and what happens is it's really not that free to release this work. There are a lot of costs, from maintenance to goodwill. If you're too busy to respond to people with pull requests, for example, because you're managing 50 things, you're costing yourself goodwill with those people that want to help you. Also perspective, this time to ask ourselves why. Craftsmanship suffers because we can't reasonably take care of all of these things at the same level that we might, or the same high standards. There's a throwaway aspect that comes out of all of this. And if nobody is editing and pruning the work and asking questions, then what happens is you end up with a GitHub junkyard. So I really like this tweet from Andrea Gollet, who's from Cordybice, who's like, I wish we had stopped making so much things and actually fixed the things that we have already. When we have less stuff to do, we can actually take care of those projects and repositories a lot more easily. So I'm a firm believer in less is more. The less that you have, the more that you can actually do with what you have. And it makes you get more creative, and it brings back some of those qualities of craftsmanship and time. So I will get now to where we were as a company with our GitHub organization, how we built our junkyard, where we had more and not less. For much of Zalando's history, its tech organization was rather hierarchical and command and control. We made a little bit of open source work, but not much. Our teams were not really encouraged to do it. Some teams were rather secretive, in fact, about releasing information to the public. This did change, so it was like a thaw over a period of years. And so teams started to make some open source work, mostly in Postgres and Python infra tools made with Python. But it was extremely limited. And so the Octocat was quite hungry as a result. At least we weren't feeding it very much. In 2015, we did a pivot in our tech management strategy. We took on the principles talked about in Daniel Pink's Drive to bring about autonomous teams that were driven by mastery of skills, knowledge, experiences, and worked with a greater purpose. We tried to facilitate more connection to the products we were building. As part of this, open source became way more encouraged and possible. We actually set about a set of principles, open source principles, that encourage people to share their code online. It also had a lot of other requirements that we had suggested for taking into consideration aspects of quality, documentation, licensing before sharing the code. But people really hung on the share your code part, and share that they did. Our GitHub process became somewhat like the Lucille Ball show, where the candy is just coming out, and it's coming out so fast that Lucille Ball and her colleague end up having to eat it because it's impossible to keep up with the pace. This happened for us on GitHub. So when in January of 2016, when I started evangelizing officially, we had about 400 repositories on GitHub. We were open sourcing all of the things, and we didn't even know it was there because there was just so much of it. How could you find anything? How could you get any sort of narrative or common sense of what our purpose was based on what we had in our organization as a whole? It felt like it was a compulsive releasing of work, just getting it out there on the internet, and then whatever happened to it, well, we'll see. But there was really not like that long-term vision for what we actually wanted to achieve with all of this work. And the work piles were building, and the junkyard was growing. We weren't asking why we were doing this to ourselves and what value to the customers, which would be potential users, contributors, adopters, what we were offering. We had lots of wild dogs running through our GitHub organizations. I mean, it was not a friendly place to go to our repository and try to find things. The quality of the work was really varied, from really good code coverage 100% type of projects to like no documentation at all and a couple lines of code, and you're like, what is this? So for a user to stumble upon this, and if they were try to use something of ours, they might, if it was something that didn't have like a file, essential files, they would be maybe putting themselves at risk. They wouldn't know that they could use what we were offering in a stable way. And what was on top of this was that we weren't responding to people. Like, people were trying to commit code to us, and we were like blowing them off, which was like really nasty. This is an example of one of the things that we actually put on the internet. This is a whole like wrapper around AWS. It's built, so it's AWS for working with autonomous teams, and there's a compliance part built into this because of our requirements as a publicly traded company using and processing lots of customer data. So this is what we built. All of the orange things were components and tools that you would have to install before you would be able to use the whole thing. For a company that didn't really have a big reputation, or if at all, in open source, asking people to download and install all of this stuff is a huge ask. Talk about friction. So high friction was kind of our aesthetic at the time. All of that stuff that you saw, this still works, and we still use it. But as an open source project, how could we ask somebody to run all of this stuff? And if the documentation somehow doesn't get updated, then their chances of being able to be successful even diminish even more. There's lots of value in what we have. There's lots of value in all of this, but it's hidden. You would have to sort through to find what you would need. Luckily, however, the team that created this realized, hey, maybe we shouldn't build stuff like this anymore. Maybe we need to actually offer, greater value to other companies, because, there is value in this work, but we're not making it so obvious. As a result, people are not contributing to the work. They're not using it. And with time, it starts to decay. And then you get junkyard time. So we're actually deprecating a lot of that stack now because we're shifting to Kubernetes. But it's still being used, but not by anybody else. This brings up a lot of questions. Like, would we have built this big sprawling platform if GitHub had charged per repo? Maybe, maybe not. But we took advantage of the freeness of GitHub and created this thing. What if we had asked the community, like, what would you do? Like, build this with us together. It might look a lot different. What if our team had actually had more time to explore these kinds of questions? They weren't under that pressure to get something out that would be sustainable for autonomous teams. What if they had been able to play around a bit more? And in so doing, think about the costs of maintenance and opportunity. We don't plan these kinds of situations. We don't plan our junkyards. But they kind of, we want to have our Corvette, right? We buy a Corvette and we think it'll be shiny and beautiful forever, and that's our hope. It's a great, aspiration. But this often doesn't turn out that way because those new things turn old. And they turn old for the reasons mentioned of pressure or no time to maintain the things. This perception that we must continue to be busy, and also the reality at times of not being able to ask ourselves, like, can we build some hygiene into managing our technical debt? There's also this belief that whatever we put out there could be useful someday. Even if you can't find it, it could be useful as long as somebody knows where it is, including ourselves. There's even nostalgia that is attached to some of the work that we put out there. This thing was important 3 years ago, and it got us 2 hires, and we went and gave talks about it. But that was 3 years ago. But we hold on to it with those memories tied into it, even if we don't take care of the work anymore. And also this idea that sharing everything, bringing back to what our team interpreted, is sharing all the things means true open source. That means you're just going to share a lot of stuff, regardless of whether it's actually of value to the world or not. We end up with these kind of harsh, junky ecosystems, and this is painful because we have to live in them. Our GitHub organizations are ecosystems for online, and if they're unfriendly, if they're not livable, then we will pay in time and maintenance, and as well as reputation and opportunity. So knowing what we had and kind of having all these things in mind about trying to make our GitHub a friendly ecosystem where we could enjoy ourselves and others could help us, I set about on doing a big dig. And to do this, I picked a couple of places to start, a couple themes. One being just applying the basic storytelling and my experiences as a writer to get our narrative to be kind of sensible for users or adopters coming to visit us on GitHub. Would we make sense? Also focusing on craftsmanship. So as a person who believes in Agile values, that the tools are great, but it's really the values of working software, collaboration, openness. Those are the things that really make it exciting. So I wanted to bring those into the open source context. And then also get a handle around sustainability. And it was a really cool, rare chance to develop a culture of open source at mega scale, and I had a lot of help along the way. To go on such an expedition takes time. For us, as such a big organization, it required a lot of steps, and these steps are still ongoing. There are some things that were pretty easy to do, and some things that are way harder. The easy stuff is setting up your framework, your templates, your guidelines, new orgs if you have to. What's slow and takes more time is changing the minds of people to develop software differently and to do open source with that idea of costs and future costs in mind. I'll run through these pretty fast because I think I'm a little mindful of time. But if you go to our GitHub organization, you can find our guidelines here. These were crowdsourced by our developers who are part of our open source guild, which is our informal gathering place to talk about open source policies and projects and things. So this was all a combined effort and has evolved over time. As new needs arise, we just add the new copy onto our GitHub repository. And it's nice and organic this way. We also added some supporting resources to put some context around the guidelines, and also to help drive the ideas of craftsmanship and sustainability. So one template that we've created is a README template, because you can do so much with the README. It's a great way to tell your story, set expectations for potential users and contributors. Like, yes, I will merge your pull requests in 2 days. No, I will not. Like, don't expect an answer from me. It's such a great place to be able to encapsulate what your story is for that particular project in a way that others can understand it. We also created a product template to get folks to ask why. Why are you building this? What are you building? What do you hope for this? Do you have a maintenance plan to maintain this over time? All of this stuff was recycled. There's so much great information on the internet. There's really not that much original to what we were doing here. We just tweaked it for our own unique circumstances, as you might for your organization if you go about setting out a set of guidelines as well. We organized repositories. So we created an incubator that was kind of a place where we could shift a lot of the stuff. It's rather optimistic, the call deprecated code incubator, but that is kind of the beauty of open source, that what is old can become new again. But this incubator is a way for us to set aside attention on our main organization for our best, most reliable work, and then everything else can go into the incubator. I mentioned before that I do a lot of one-on-one working with teams and developers to try to help them understand the context of their work and think about it differently, from making time to optimize by reducing their workload to thinking about those customers out in the world that they might be trying to connect with their projects, and really getting to the bottom of, are we solving problems and for whom? A year and a half into this, we have some pretty great signs of progress. We have a lot less work on our main organization than we did. It was like 330 plus projects. Now we're down to about 72, and we can get rid of more. More questions are being asked. We're collaborating more with different companies and individuals who can actually, we're inviting them to build things with us in a much more proactive way than before, in a much friendlier way. We're archiving things, and we're also influencing other companies with our guidelines primarily to develop differently. And we also are bringing more craftsmanship into each repo by putting all the essential ingredients like docs and essential files in there. But we still have challenges, mostly because when you're trying to change a culture, it doesn't happen overnight. These kinds of habits of craftsmanship take time. There's still a belief that when you put it on GitHub, it's done. Yay, it's done. We still put out way too much stuff that we can manage. There's this fear of missing out. If we don't rush to publish, then somebody else will put out the idea and we will have our opportunity snatched away. Kind of this belief that what we expect, which is a minimum viable product, something that somebody could contribute to, use, understand, that there's a bit of a struggle with what that means, and people will hear, no, don't publish at all, it has to be perfect, and that's never what it's been about. It's about having something that's basic and ready, that somebody can actually connect with and understand, they can see what's happening in this repository and contribute to or use it. And the incubator has become our junkyard in place of the main Zalando organization. We're still not as friendly as we could be. We could increase the transparency by managing expectations through our READMEs better. We're still not responding to people in a timely way who are trying to contribute to us. And we could be better at that, at telling folks, we might take a while, or we might not get back to you at all. Go forth and fork and do what you like, but we're busy, we're not taking care of this project anymore. We're not really being this strong about that, and as a result, we still have that risk of people coming and trying to work on our stuff or use it and not having a stable project to turn to. Getting leads and heads to buy into this is also an ongoing task. With delivery pressures being what they are, putting out new features, putting out new products, open source might seem like a different world for some of our leads because it's a separate or apart from the actual products being delivered. And what we're trying to do is kind of encourage people to think of all of the software we build as part of one umbrella. Product mindset to open source is also something that takes time to help people understand. I mean, there's still articles in the product world about what is an MVP. So, I mean, these are really hard questions that nobody has the firm answer to. We're building more of a maturity model mindset as we go because we see that we have the need. It has to actually come from the organization, not just one person, who happens to be me at the moment. So what we're actually doing to address this is having an official strategy, which we're rolling out this week, that addresses this need for craftsmanship and encourages it. We're setting up a peer review group, so we have more of a democratic buy-in, distributed feedback culture for new projects that want to come online. People can go to the review group and get that kind of advice and counsel so that when they do go to publish, they have the highest level of success that we can offer them by having feedback come and drive those projects instead of just kind of doing it blindly. We're making interaction with the community non-negotiable. Like, you need to think about your potential users and contributors or your communities of practice. And we're also going to be doing a lot of training and coaching folks to really get everybody to see, like, this isn't just a set of rules and values. We're not trying to, like, make life arduous and terrible for you. We want you to succeed. And here are some simple things that you can do so that your project develops and blossoms instead of becomes like an old junky car. So I'm closing out with a couple of tips, learnings, and some asks. So please, like, if you haven't cleaned up your GitHub org, start now, because the longer you wait, the bigger your junkyard will grow. You'll be a lot happier if you tackle it now and establish some maintenance into your processes. If you're a new company, start with this mindset from the beginning, because you will also be very happy that you did years from now. When people are doing this maintenance out of habit and it's an expectation instead of like something that you have to introduce. Ask why. Always ask why. Why are we publishing this? Why do we care about this? Why don't we care about this? Why are we building something new instead of contribute to this big, vast infrastructure that needs a lot of help to keep running on GitHub? And don't make cleanup your burden. So don't become obsessive about it, and so that it's like not fun, because it can easily not become not fun. Like when our moms and dads asked us to clean our rooms up, like that wasn't fun, right? We often rebelled. I did, and had lots of stuff on the floor. Your developers might do that too, and you might want to do it. Like, why are we doing this to ourselves? This wasn't supposed to be like this. So cut some slack. This is hard work, and it's not going to happen like magic. You know, it's an evolutionary process. Keep it simple as well. Don't make so many guidelines that people hate them. And then my last ask is, please respond to people. Like, this is like the biggest thing. Like, it's so unfriendly not to respond to people who are trying to ask you about your project or contribute to it. Like, just please do it. And I put this quote from Josh Berkus, who is helping us develop one of our projects, Patroni, this Postgres high availability template. Like, he recently wrote a blog post where he talks about like what happens when you don't respond to people. They just have no incentive to ever help you again. So the golden rule is really applicable to open source. Think about it, or else you might have a junkyard that you could have avoided just by communicating to the world and helping them help you. So I'm done. This is me. This is the URL one last time for our open source projects that you should pay most attention to. This is my Feed Me, Read Me's project, so if you want to read me help, get some advice, do that. I'm on Twitter, and that's my email. Thanks.